and mutilated and burned in that stream.
It almost looked like an autopsy left undone.
This was obviously not a run-of-the-mill murder.
We had some kind of cycle on our hands.
When two suspects implicate one another, the cards of fate send investigators spiraling down a dark and twisted trail.
He made the police really creeped out.
He believes that he can read minds and that he can control people.
This wasn't a man that she was dealing with, this was a devil.
There was blood splatter all over the walls.
He was cool, he was collected, he was...
North of Midtown Manhattan lies the village of Spring Valley, a diverse suburb divided between Ramapo and Clarkstown, New York.
Spring Valley historically was a resort town and beautiful area, mountains, trees, rivers.
It's a big mixture of different communities that do get along together very well. In particular, within the Hispanic community.
In the summer of 1998, Spring Valley had been hit with a torrential rainfall as part of an unusual weather phenomenon crossing the country.
At that period of time, the U.S. was under the influence of El Nino. And what that meant for our area here in the Northeast was rain, rain, rain.
Our parks was flooded, our streets, people complaining about their yards, their houses being flooded.
But by Monday, June 13th, the rain has finally subsided.
A local resident went out to inspect the water levels in the creek in his backyard.
He was checking the drainage because, you know, all the rain that they've been having.
Whenever there's rain and stuff, he gets a little flooding, and because of El Nino, it was a lot more rain.
However, when the man reaches the edge of the creek, he notices something unsettling.
It looked like a body wrapped in some sort of plastic.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
And horrified, he immediately ran to the phone, called 911, and said, "I think you need to get here now."
Investigators quickly respond to the man's home.
It's back here.
I was led to the backyard of the caller that called it in. The body appeared to be wrapped in some kind of plastic and set on fire, and it was already decomposing. I knew that this was going to be a very difficult case to even start to put together.
There was no trace evidence, nothing you might expect at a typical crime scene.
The police were able to at least ascertain that it appeared to be a young Hispanic woman, probably in her early 20s.
Investigators hope fingerprints will help ID their victim, but they're soon hit with a horrific realization.
There's no hands.
They're gone?
To my shock, the hands on this body were missing. They were actually hacked off.
This was something that really took them back.
I'm realizing that based on the hands being cut off and the body being set on fire, that this was done to try and prevent us from identifying who this person was.
The detectives didn't have a hand, let alone a print. So they had to call the medical examiner.
After the medical examiner removes the burned plastic, he discovers even more horrifying details.
Not only are her hands severed, she was disemboweled as well.
But regardless of the body's condition, the medical examiner is able to ascertain the cause of death.
Massive blunt force trauma to the head.
This lady was brutally murdered with some kind of foreign object, maybe a sledgehammer.
They believe those blows to the head probably caused instant death, which is good because the severing of the hands, the mutilating of the body were most likely done post-mortem, so she didn't have to suffer through that.
Unfortunately, a large part of her face is indistinguishable, so they are still unable to identify her.
We really had nothing to go on, but luckily I've worked with this awesome officer from Clarkstown who is also a sketch artist. So I immediately contacted him.
He was able to duplicate one side of the face to match the other side of the face so that you now had a face in its entirety.
This sketch was then put to all the newspapers and television stations in the New York tri-state area.
And before long, they get a call from a local man named Stanley Ellis.
Anderson.
I'm calling about the girl in the newspaper.
He immediately recognized the sketch, particularly the gap in the teeth.
It was his missing friend, 20-year-old Beatrice Alvarez.
He said that was my friend Beatrice. I hadn't seen her in over a month. I wondered what happened to her.
On the cusp of adulthood, Beatrice Alvarez had already experienced more than many people do in a lifetime.
She was a refugee from Havana, Cuba. She endured many trials along the way, but she was resilient.
Her and her family, they ended up in Queens.
But like many hoping to achieve the American dream, the obstacles they faced proved to be insurmountable.
They did fall on hard times, and unfortunately, it broke the family up. The brother and the sister, they moved away. The mother ended up, I believe, in a homeless shelter.
Although she did come from this background where her family struggled, Beatrice did not let that stop her.
She became a hairdresser to earn a living. She was talented in that way.
Anybody that she came in contact with instantly fell in love with her because she just had that charming personality.
She always had a smile. She was always upbeat. She was always determined.
But doing hair wasn't Beatrice's true passion.
She liked to do hair as a profession, but her heart and soul was really much into the fine arts, and she wanted to be an artist.
One of her prized possessions was her sketch pad, and she took it with her everywhere she went.
She wanted to be somebody. She wanted to live the artist life.
She was trying to aspire to reach the American dream.
Having spent much of her life alone, Beatrice also yearned for companionship. And during the spring of 1998, she thought she'd found just that in local shop owner Felipe Rivera.
Hey.
Hi.
How was work?
It was good. A little slow, but it gave me time to work on my sketches.
She is in love with him and is ready to start this life with him. However, she then meets his friend, Vinicio.
Hola, Felipe.
Vinicio.
Vinicio walks in, and that's all that she can see.
Hey, Vinicio, this is my girl, Beatrice.
Nice to meet you, Beatrice.
Nice to meet you.
You two want to grab some lunch today?
Oh, man, I can't. I have to stay behind and man the store.
Felipe encouraged her to go get lunch with Vinicio.
Hey, you two be good.
They decide to go out for lunch together, and that was it. She's totally into this guy.
It was one moment where they were actually alone together, just talking and getting to know each other, and sparks started to fly.
These are amazing.
Thank you. I want to be an artist full time, but city can be a lot, you know?
Trust me, I get it.
Vinicio was also an immigrant. He came from South America, and that was the common bond the two of them had. He's 32, and he seems to have this stuff together. He's got his own place. He's got a job, a good job, too.
Vinicio was working at a military manufacturer.
It's not easy to survive here, but hard work and determination will get you a long way.
You think so? Feels kind of hopeless sometimes.
I won't let you give up. You got real talent, B.
She opens up herself to a situation where she begins to fall for this guy. The stars begin to twinkle. It's always that, for lack of a better term, that apple in the garden, that forbidden fruit.
Listen, I've actually got some connections. I think I could help you.
Really?
Yeah.
That'd be amazing.
Ultimately, Beatrice decided that she would leave her boyfriend and go live with Vinicio Valverde.
But now, after receiving a call from her friend, Stanley Ellis, detectives believe Beatrice Alvarez is the woman found brutally murdered and dismembered in a local creek.
Yeah, that sketch looks exactly like her.
Her hands had been cut off, and she had been disemboweled, burned.
Very dangerous, maybe deranged person that will go to these kind of extremes. We had some kind of cycle on our hands.
"20-year-old Beatrice Alvarez was an artist chasing her dreams when she fell in love with 32-year-old Vinicio Valverde.
They felt they had the same likes, and it was their life stories were about the same, how they immigrated from another country to come here for a better life.
Beatrice believes that she has found her soulmate, her match. This is the man that is going to help her really build that American dream.
But now Beatrice's promising future hangs in the balance.
Her friend believes she was the woman police found, burned and dismembered in a local creek.
It's one thing to kill a person. It's another thing to cut their stomach open and then cut off their hand. That speaks to a sociopath.
When was the last time you saw Beatrice?
It's been a few weeks.
He said they knew each other from working at the salon and used to talk and hang out quite often.
Then one day, Beatrice was gone.
It was really just quite sudden. One day she just doesn't show up and never showed up again.
I don't see her for weeks. And then her boyfriend shows up for a haircut appointment.
Hey, Stanley.
Hey, have you seen Beatrice?
He says, what's going on? Is she okay?
Stanley says he was surprised by what Vinicio said next.
She left me for another guy.
He just casually says, well, one night she got into a car with a musician and drove off.
A musician?
Yeah. I don't know his name, but she left me for him.
Did he say where they went?
Nope. He didn't give me any other details.
After speaking with Stanley, investigators are able to confirm his hunch about his missing friend.
Rockland County was very fortunate to have a brilliant medical examiner.
Once they had a name, they were able to use DNA evidence to confirm her identity. They were certain Beatrice was their deceased victim.
But when they attempt to deliver the tragic news to Beatrice's next of kin, detectives hit a wall.
I did everything I could to reach out to the mother, but unfortunately, due to her being homeless, I couldn't locate her.
As Beatrice's family had been dispersed really across the country, it was very difficult to track down the next of kin.
Thanks.
But eventually, the brother called, and I actually spoke to him on the phone, and he was informed that his sister was killed. Unfortunately, during my career, I've made too many death notifications, and no matter how many you do, it does not get easier. And this was probably one of the worst ones that I had to do, because not only did I have to make a notification that a loved one was dead, but they were brutally murdered.
Beatrice's brother has no idea who would want to do this to his sister.
The distance had made it hard to keep in touch. He didn't know anything about who Beatrice was living with, who her friends were, nothing.
Detectives are eager to speak with Beatrice's ex-boyfriend, Vinicio Valverde, about the mysterious musician she supposedly ran off with prior to her disappearance.
Now, we may have a suspect. Is that what led to her death?
But then, detectives get a promising break in the case.
Come in. Detective Jones, Yonkers PD.
Yonkers is a suburb of North Manhattan, about 40 minutes southeast of Spring Valley.
I heard about the case you were working on, and it sounded extremely familiar.
He said they had someone in their jurisdiction that committed almost the same similar type of sadistic homicide.
Check it out.
The Yonkers detective explains that in August of 1990, a woman named Rosie Vasquez was brutally murdered in their jurisdiction.
Yonkers police said that they had arrested and tried a gentleman named Bradford Wise for mutilating his girlfriend Rosie's body almost in a similar fashion to what happened to Beatrice.
Rosie was a small, petite Hispanic girl who was then post-mortem terribly mutilated. It fit all the same pattern of Beatrice's murder.
However, when it went to trial, the jury found Bradford not guilty. He was acquitted of all charges and walked out a free man.
We were sure it was him based on the circumstantial evidence, but we didn't have enough physical evidence to convince the jury.
After he was acquitted of the crime, he still calls the police and taunts them with details about where they can find different parts of Rosie's body.
It's been absolutely maddening.
The police can't do anything about it because double jeopardy, meaning he can't be re-arrested and retried for a crime he was already arrested and tried and acquitted of.
But Yonkers police are convinced if Bradford got away with murder once, he could have tried to do it again.
If it quacks like a duck, it must be a duck. So Bradford became the #1 suspect.
It started to really sound like we had a serial killer on the loose.
The moment I loved our Subaru Outback most was the moment they walked away from it.
Mom! Oh, thank goodness.
And that's why our family will only drive a Subaru.
Investigating the brutal murder of 20-year-old Beatrice Alvarez have just received a visit from Yonkers police.
Yonkers detectives say they handled a case similar a few years earlier, and the alleged killer, Bradford Wise, was never incarcerated for the crime.
It started to really sound like we had a serial killer on the loose.
Thanks for passing this along, Detective.
Absolutely.
Investigators know that if there really is a serial killer at large in their community, they need to act fast.
I've got my guys searching for him as we speak. We'll be in touch.
They start trying to find Bradford to talk to him.
But the next day, their fervor comes to a screeching halt.
Anderson. Oh, hey, Detective Jones. Any sign of Bradford?
Bradford had recently been arrested on arson charges in a neighboring community. He'd been in jail at Westchester County, awaiting trial since late May.
Since police believe Beatrice was killed in early June, it would have been impossible for Bradford to commit the crime.
I'm so sorry to get your hopes up.
It's okay. We appreciate your help.
Just let me know if there's anything else that I can do.
Thanks, Jones.
That deconstructed the whole idea that they had their guy.
It wasn't Bradford.
Damn.
With their strongest lead now a dead end, detectives shift their focus to their victim's most recent ex-boyfriend, Vinicio Valverde.
Hi, are you Mr. Valverde?
Yes.
So the detectives asked Mr. Valverde if they could speak with him about Beatrice Alvarez.
At the mention of Beatrice's name, Vinicio immediately got emotional.
Yes, come in. I still can't believe she's gone.
Vinicio invites the police into his apartment.
And something inside immediately catches the attention of detectives.
What caught my eye right away was this makeshift shrine, or whatever we want to call it.
It had upside down prayer cards. It had pictures of women, some with pins in them. And it also had what appeared to be a pentagram on the bottom.
And in that shrine was a photo of Beatrice Alvarez.
It really caught my eye, but Mr. Valverde, he didn't seem too nervous about it.
What's that?
Oh, it's supposed to give you good luck.
He said it was some spiritualism that he hoped would bring her back to him since she had left, and that the shrine was devoted to Beatrice's return.
Even though she was deceased, he was hoping she would return to him in spirit.
It's our understanding that Beatrice left you for a musician shortly before she was murdered. Is that correct?
Yes. It broke my heart.
He's not able to provide any other defining characteristics about the musician or where they may have gone.
I asked him, how did he meet Beatrice? And it was through a friend that he knew by the name of Felipe, who worked in the city.
Beatrice had been dating Felipe. They were living together.
When Beatrice and I met, it was like boom, fireworks.
He said he never intended to steal his friend's girl, but they had a connection and neither one of them could resist.
But apparently he treated her bad.
Vinicio says Beatrice opened up to him about her relationship with Felipe, and it raised cause for alarm.
He said Felipe was abusing Beatrice and kept her locked up in a room.
He was keeping her like a prisoner.
Spring Valley detectives are speaking with Vinicio Valverde about the murder of his ex-girlfriend, 20-year-old aspiring artist, Beatrice Alvarez. According to Vinicio, Beatrice had a tumultuous relationship with her other ex, Felipe Rivera.
He would hit her. He would lock her up.
How do you know this?
She told me.
Beatrice had told him that he was keeping her like a prisoner. He was trying to poison her. He was abusive, and she couldn't get away fast enough.
Vinicio says he knew he needed to step in to save Beatrice.
He was able to convince her that if she left Felipe and left with him, that he can give her a better life. She was so excited to start this new life that she actually goes back to the shop, breaks up with her boyfriend, and literally packs up what she has, all her life savings and stuff, and goes with Vinicio and ends up moving in with him in Spring Valley.
But apparently I couldn't make her happy.
Beatrice told him she was going to leave him and left with a musician who lived in Manhattan.
Just like that, Beatrice was gone. Vinicio said he hadn't seen her since.
But despite Beatrice leaving with the mysterious musician, Vinicio believes someone else is responsible for what happened to her.
You know, I think Felipe did this.
Vinicio started crying, very, very tearful, and had immediately pinned her murder on her former lover, Felipe.
Felipe Rivera did this.
He's heartbroken. He's upset. He was assuming that she went back to Felipe and he started his abuse again and possibly took it too far.
There's no telling what he's capable of.
Detectives fear Vinicio might be right.
Police now have to interview Felipe. If even half of what Vinicio was saying is true, maybe he is the real suspect.
We locate him in the city and we have a conversation with him and ask him if he would come back with us to Spring Valley. And he was more than willing to.
I just can't believe that she's gone. Even though things did not work out between us, I'll always have love for that girl.
Basically, he tells us he was in love with Beatrice, that was the love of his life, and that his friend who was supposed to just go out on a lunch date with her, Mr. Valverde, ends up taking his girlfriend.
Is it true that you were controlling of Beatrice when you were together? Abusive?
What? Never.
When they tell Felipe all the horrible things his friend Vinicio has said about him, he kind of loses it a little.
I mean, if anything, Vinicio was the abusive one. She told me so.
Felipe's like, wait a minute. She told me that Vinicio was the one who is the abusive one. And so now you got, he said.
She could not stand him. I mean, he was crazy. She wanted my help to get her out.
Basically, she's now asking Felipe for money and stuff, and she wants to go back.
I feel guilty for even introducing her to him in the first place. I mean, he's shown me his true colors before.
This is where it takes a really bizarre turn.
Felipe told us that he knew for a fact that Valverde practiced some kind of black magic, and that he believes that he can read minds and that he can control people.
It's a stunning claim, but is his story true?
As Felipe is telling us about this black magic, I'm really still not sold on it. And then Felipe is telling me how he was trying to give Vinicio a job in his shop.
This was a few months before Vinicio and Beatrice met.
Vinicio Valverde was trying to offer his services of being what you would, I guess, call a mind reader, a psychic, someone that can heal people.
Felipe thought Vinicio's services would be a great addition to his shop, but shortly after being hired, the situation took a chilling turn.
This looks good.
Something's not right.
What do you mean?
I guess he felt that the energy in the store needed to be shifted.
A sacrifice must be made.
And so he had a dove with him, and he wanted to sacrifice the dove in the store to purify it.
Wait, Vinicio, this is too much.
Fine. You just don't understand.
Mr. Valverde instead took out a syringe and put it into the dove, drew out some blood, and then put a drop of the blood from the dove in each of his eyes.
Vinicio thought he had power through black magic, power over women, power to control situations. And this is how he used these sacrificing techniques and other rituals.
Was Beatrice Alvarez just another one of Vinicio's sacrificial lambs?
It's beyond sociopathy. It's beyond psychopathology.
New York have just learned that Vinicio Valverde was exhibiting some chilling behavior before his ex-girlfriend, 20-year-old Beatrice Alvarez, was killed and dismembered.
Vinicio was known to practice black magic and did show some violent tendencies.
Beatrice's other ex, Felipe Rivera, says he witnessed it firsthand after hiring Vinicio to work in his shop.
I'm open to many different spiritual practices, but that was too much, even for me.
Felipe was like, I can't be having this in my shop.
The tapes of service Vinicio was providing were just way too extreme, so Felipe stopped having him work there.
I mean, we remained friends afterwards. I just thought he was a good guy at heart who had gotten too deep into black magic. But now I believe I was wrong.
And when detectives dig deeper into Vinicio Valverde's background, they discover even more disconcerting information.
Vinicio stole a book on demonology from the New York Library. He was trying to do these evil spells on his ex-wife.
Right there, that threw up a flag right away, because now that took my mind back to this memorial that's in Mr. Valverde's apartment.
In that shrine back in his apartment, there was a picture of a woman with pins stuck in it, and that was his ex-wife.
They really started looking into this stuff, realizing that, wait a minute, this is not a call to action for a loved one to come home. This shrine was to take control of someone's spirit.
But are Vinicio's spiritual practices really the signs of a deranged killer?
The detectives did their research and learned that whenever someone who practices black magic kills somebody, they keep a trophy of the person to keep their spirit under control in the afterlife.
They must take a body part and keep it close to them. And as long as they have that body part, the soul cannot come back to haunt them or hurt them.
So they felt like if Vinicio really did this, he may have some parts of Beatrice in his home, most likely her hands, since they know that they were missing from her body.
On July 14th, Spring Valley police execute a search warrant at Vinicio's apartment, and inside the bedroom, they make an alarming discovery.
To my shock, there was blood everywhere.
There was blood splatter all over the walls. There was blood on the floor.
As soon as I flipped the mattress over at the head part, you could see a big red stain that appeared to be blood.
Obviously, things are taking a different turn now after the find of this blood.
But that's not all they find.
I recall going into one of the dresser drawers, and I found female fingernails and human teeth.
And they find a hammer, and what they remember from the ME's report was that Beatrice's body was hit, blunt force trauma to the head.
There was a saw and a large knife, so you could see that these were probably the murder weapons.
Investigators also locate something near and dear to Beatrice, her sketchbook.
So I had already learned that Beatrice did not go anywhere without her sketchbook. That was her world.
She absolutely would not have left it behind. So why was it there?
But one crucial piece of evidence is still missing: Beatrice's severed hands.
I'm now convinced that the hands are somewhere in there, but it's a small room, and I turned that room upside down. I couldn't find it. So my next thing was I reached out to an agency that had cadaver dogs. The dog kept hitting on this small closet, and I went in the closet. I took all the clothes out of the closet, emptied the closet out.
And they're looking and they're looking. Dogs know, and the handler knows this dog is sensing something, but they just don't see anything.
But then the dog starts to get on his hind leg and starts pointing up. And so the police are looking up.
The handler looked up inside the closet and he saw what appeared to be a false ceiling.
I see the handler reach up and he pulls down this fake and
Down dropped a hand, a mummified.
Didn't commit.
Meek Mill received a 22-month sentence.
See how he beat a system
He has turned himself into a leader.
that tried to beat him. Celebrity Crime Files, all new next on TV One.
Spring Valley investigators have just made a series of gruesome discoveries inside the bedroom of 32-year-old Vinicio Valverde.
Police believe that Vinicio killed his ex-girlfriend, Beatrice Alvarez. They found blood spatter and other human remains inside of his apartment.
But the most shocking evidence of all is located in the bedroom closet.
I see the handler reach up and he pulls down this fake and
Down dropped a hand, a mummified hand.
I hear him yelling. He goes, "I found what you're looking for." The only problem was it was mummified.
Since the hand is mummified, obtaining the forensic evidence to officially link it to Beatrice Alvarez will be especially challenging.
They needed to rush it to the medical examiner and see what he could do.
No matter how hard or where I checked, I could not find the other hand.
Fortunately, the medical examiner has a plan to rejuvenate the fingerprints from the hand found in Vinicio's closet.
He had perfected a method to rehydrate mummified hands. And so, given his technique that he had developed, we were able to rehydrate the hand.
They get a fingerprint impression and they send off the prints for testing.
And finally, we got that break where it came back that that hand did belong to Beatrice Alvarez.
For investigators, this proves without a doubt Vinicio is their man. Now all they need is a confession.
They take him into custody and bring him to the police headquarters.
We found some very interesting things at your place, Vinicio.
Once they tell him the hand was in your apartment, it matches Beatrice. Does he break down at this point? Absolutely not. He is not admitting to anything.
I didn't kill her.
He was calm, he was cool, he was collected, he was a killer.
You guys must have planted it.
So as a last-ditch effort, he now tries to blame the police for planting the hand in his closet, which is absurd.
Someone is framing me. I swear.
At this point, detectives are done listening to Vinicio's excuses.
He never really owned up to it, but based on the overwhelming evidence, we were convinced already that we had enough.
Vinicio Valverde is charged with second-degree murder for the killing of Beatrice Alvarez.
He was not charged with murder in the first degree. because you need more mitigating factors.
First-degree murder is very difficult to prove because you have to have the perfect set of circumstances to prove first-degree murder. In this instance, the cops did not have witnesses. The body wasn't found until way after the fact.
And Vinicio definitely isn't going down easy.
While he was pending trial, there was a moment where he tried to kill himself with a bedsheet.
He tries to end his life so he doesn't have to face his punishment.
Thank God the corrections officers were on duty and they caught it right away and they prevented him from taking his own life.
After his failed suicide attempt, Vinicio is strictly monitored until his trial begins in July 1999.
This is a person who was aloof, who really didn't have too many social connections, but heavily relied on connecting with the spiritual world.
And as the prosecution presents their case, they explain how Vinicio's connection to the spiritual world intersected with a dangerous obsession that led to murder.
It was my view of the evidence that we had that this was what you would kind of call a crime of passion.
The theory of this is that Mr. Valverde met this gorgeous young lady, instantly fell in love with her. He was very jealous of her, very controlling of her.
And his involvement with black magic was starting to make her feel really uncomfortable.
Prosecutors say that eventually, Beatrice had enough.
Where do you think you're going?
I can't stay here anymore, Vinicio.
You lost your mind?
Let go of me. You're not who I thought you were.
Beatrice was planning to exit the relationship.
And that was the ultimate slap in the face for a person like this. It was an insult to his masculinity, to his alleged powers of black magic, and he couldn't let that go.
It was my argument to the jury that if he couldn't have her, then nobody would.
So he carried out his most sadistic ritual yet.
First, her skull was bashed.
Show you who I really am.
And then, after she was killed, he proceeded to humiliate and dismember the corpse.
He found a way to remove her from this physical world in efforts to connect with her in the spiritual world so that she would never leave him.
After that, Vinicio put her body in plastic bags and took it to a secluded area to burn.
But when the body didn't burn completely like he had hoped, he decided to take what was left and throw it in a local creek.
For a while, Vinicio thought he got away with murder, but then the storm hit.
He didn't expect that weeks later it would flood so bad to push her body downstream, where she was eventually discovered.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
After a week-long trial, it takes jurors only 5 hours to return with a verdict.
It didn't take long for the jury to come back with a verdict of guilty. And Vinicio was convicted of second-degree homicide.
Mr. Valverde was sentenced to the maximum under the law of 25 years to life. He is currently serving that sentence. At the trial, there were some family members that did attend on behalf of Beatrice, so it was really satisfying that we were able to bring the family members of Beatrice Alvarez some sense of justice, given the viciousness of this crime.
He was denied parole in May of 2023.
With her killer now behind bars, Beatrice's memory lives on in those who knew and loved her.
We lost a major, I want to say an angel, a true American dream. You're talking about somebody that came from Cuba, came here with nothing but a dream. Just imagine what this young lady could have been today.
She had the world, she had time, she had everything ahead of her, and it was cut short because of the selfishness of one person.
There is truly no happy ending to this because a life was lost, but it does give you a little good feeling knowing that we were able to bring a closure to the family. You'll never forget, you'll never forgive, but you can start to heal.
She didn't realize that this wasn't a man that she was dealing with. This was a devil she was dealing with.
To grow up in North Philly, survive the streets, and gain respect as a rapper, you need more than tough skin. You need Kevlar, raw talent, and a dream. Success is one of the few ways to make the cost of that armor worth the reward.
You could survive in North Philly, but it made you a certain kind of person.
For Philly rap legend Meek Mill, determination set his path toward a dream he refused to wake up from, despite the nightmares along the way.
Meek Mill is more than a rapper. He's a movement.
He's a living legend in the hip-hop community and in Philly.
In 2007, Meek's Philly Fairy.
The first time I saw her run, I said, whoa, this girl is rolling.
She was probably the best runner in the state, and she was a hopeful for the Olympics.
Shelley had left to go to a party in Center City and never returned home.
Flyers are going up. People were knocking on doors.
He found what appeared to be the remains of a human being.
People are shocked. This is not the outcome that they wanted.
Well, I'm hearing rumors of her mom being jealous, not being a good person at all.
She was sobbing periodically, but never did I see an actual tear.
It's just mind-boggling.
It's 1993 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the city of brotherly love.
Philly was alive with energy. It was, it's the early 90s, so hip-hop is at an all-time high. It's a new art form. Everybody's, the fashion, Philly high schools, we're just like one big hip-hop video. In West Philly, you would have saw sweatsuits and colors and hoodies and fly sneakers and jewelry and leather jackets. You would have got all of that flavor.
On the evening of Tuesday, January 19th, police in West Philadelphia get a call from a concerned mother. Vivian King reports that her 17-year-old daughter, Shelley, is missing.
Her daughter had told her that she was leaving on Sunday night, the 17th, to go to a party.
Vivian had hoped that she had stayed overnight with a girlfriend. Shelley stayed out and stayed at girlfriends' houses frequently.
But now, her daughter has been gone for nearly 48 hours.
The last that this mother knew, her daughter was going to a party with friends. So what happened to Shelley? Why did she disappear?
Born on March 15, 1975, Shelley grew up in a quiet neighborhood in West Philadelphia.
Shelley lived on Edgewood Street, a working-class black neighborhood, and it was a very typical neighborhood.
Her stepfather was Clarence Jones, and her mother was Vivian King. Shelley's last name was Turner, but she did not know her father.
Shelley lived with her mother, her stepfather, who was also the biological father of her younger sister.
He had raised Shelley from when Shelley was like 6 months old. He had been in the picture all of those years. Vivian King was a nurse's aide. She helped Clarence Jones with his newspaper route. He delivered papers to a warehouse, and including the Sunday paper.
Shelley Turner was really a precocious kind of kid in that she had unbelievable talent.
She had been a runner from the time she was 7 years old. Shelley ran everywhere. She ran to the grocery stores, she ran in the neighborhood.
By the age of 10, Shelley was competing.
Shelley was one of those kids where every track meet, she's walking away like this with 4 trophies.
Her sophomore year in high school, Shelley transferred from Overbrook to William Penn High School to run for legendary coach Tim Hickey.
William Penn's track team was known nationally because of the quality of the girls there. Coach Hickey devoted his life to helping these girls.
William Penn did not have a track of its own, so the girls used to run on the streets. And that's how they became so good, because they were running on concrete.
They ran on the sidewalk, so he had markers out there for 200 meters, 400 meters. This man was brilliant. She adored Mr. Hickey.
Over the next 2 years, Shelley thrived.
She was a senior who had big things ahead for her. Big things. She was running very well.
She was probably the best runner in the state and probably one of the best in the country. And she was hoping to go to college. A couple of schools had already offered her scholarships. And she was hopeful for the Olympics.
She was very humble about it. She was very laid back with it. Like Shelley Turner would tear your head off on a track, but just as well go and just sit back and laugh with you and kick back. She wasn't boastful, she wasn't arrogant or conceited.
Vivian proudly displayed the proof of her daughter's success.
It was like a museum. You know, you walk in Shelley Turner's living room and there are medals, there are trophies, plaques. It was the first thing you noticed when you walked in. It was just wasn't room for anything else. And I told her, I said, if you win one more thing, it's gonna have to go on the porch.
Shelley was a rising star, but that didn't keep her from helping around the house.
Her mother was strict, and she had a lot of responsibility.
She spent her almost entire time either with the track program, school, or at home babysitting her younger sister. She did have her girlfriends, but they were also mostly all track people too.
When you spend so much time with your teammates, it's just like, that's just what it is. You have other friends, you have outside interests, but we ran track. We didn't just participate. We lived it, we breathed it. You know, it was a part of everything we did.
Shelley was driven, responsible, and always where she was supposed to be. Until Vivian reports her missing on the evening of January 19th, 1993. An officer from Philadelphia's 19th District arrives at Vivian's home.
The officer was told by Vivian that her daughter, Shelley, had left on Sunday night to go to a party in Center City and never returned home.
Vivian said that she stayed awake and that Shelley didn't get home and that she eventually went to sleep. And the next morning, Shelley still wasn't there, but Vivian had hoped that she had stayed overnight with a girlfriend.
Shelley had a track meet that she was to be at on Monday on Martin Luther King Day, even though there was no school that day. And she was the captain of the team, and she was a very pivotal part of the team.
Vivian tried to find out if Shelley showed up for the meet.
Vivian King called Mr. Hickey, and he did not return the phone call. So the next morning, which would have been Tuesday morning, Vivian King called the school and asked to speak with Shelley's first period teacher and found out that Shelley had not reported to school that day. Vivian then asked to speak with Mr. Hickey. The teacher went and got Mr. Hickey and brought him to the phone. And Vivian found out that Shelley was the only one that had not come to the meet.
She was the captain of the team, For her to not show up for the track meet indicated that there probably was a severe problem.
Vivian's next phone call was to police.
Anything could have happened to Shelley, from being abducted, being attacked, or just basically maybe stopping at another friend's house and spending the night.
The officer gathers more details.
The JAD officers would have asked what clothing she had been wearing. They would have gotten the names of some of her friends.
Shelley had a purple tracksuit on, purple sneakers.
That information was then passed on to the Juvenile Aid Division people and to the West Detective Division.
The search for Shelley Turner is on.
The entire division, police division and detective division, were made aware of the fact that she was missing.
On Tuesday, January 19th, 1993, investigators with Philadelphia's Juvenile Aid Division begin their search for Shelley Turner. The 17-year-old hasn't been seen since Sunday.
Shelley had told her mother that she was going to be going to a party that night.
It was like a citywide kind of fun thing where whenever there's no school on a Monday, the promoters would promote to us, and we were all in. You know, we liked to dance. William Penn was a dancing track team.
Investigators speak with Shelley's friend Andrea, who lives across the street. She reveals that Shelley didn't go to the party.
She had actually gone to visit a new boyfriend in North Philadelphia.
Shelley had kept her budding romance with fellow student Sean Williams from her mother.
Shelley had no intention of going to this party. Andrea was the only person who knew that Shelley was gonna hang out with Sean, her new boyfriend.
Before Shelley left on the bus for Sean's house, Andrea gave her some last-minute fashion advice.
Her friend said, well, your outfit isn't nice enough. With what you're wearing, wear this jacket with it.
Shelley's wearing a purple tracksuit and a black leather jacket. So that was what they were searching for when they were looking for Shelley.
For detectives, locating Sean Williams is their top priority.
He had transferred in. He was a new student at William Penn. They did talk with him immediately. They got his address through the school.
A couple of detectives came to my house to question me.
Sean tells detectives he met Shelley after transferring to Penn at the beginning of the school year.
My best friend, she kind of brought me into the fold with a lot of the groups and at William Penn, and Shelley was part of the track team. I'm seeing her in the gym, I'm seeing her smile. I think she got cute for me that day. She was definitely a pretty girl. After maybe talking on the phone a time or two, now I feel more comfortable kicking it with her.
So, a few days earlier, Sean invited Shelley to his house for Sunday dinner.
My mom fixed dinner every Sunday. She fixed a nice meal. We enjoyed dinner, we laughed, our family laughs, just did our Sunday thing. My mom loved her. So after dinner, we go up to the room, we chilling, we talking, listening to music, we having a good time, we just hanging out for a few hours. My mom's in the place, so we're being good. And I guess time got by us for a while, and now it's late.
At approximately 2 in the morning, Shelley had to go home, and he walked Shelley to the bus stop.
I wanted to make sure that she got home safely. The bus took about 20 minutes to come because it's Sunday night. I wanted to give her a kiss. And she was like, no, I don't kiss in public. In that time, the bus driver had to pause a moment to look at us.
Sean tells them Shelley got on.
From that information, they were able to track down the actual bus driver.
He does remember that Shelly went all the way to the last stop and that Shelly gets off on 60th and Girard.
The fact that the bus driver knew that she had gotten off the bus cleared the boyfriend from any involvement.
Now the question is, what happened to Shelly when she got off the bus?
The bus led her off 6 blocks from her home.
Did she get home? Did she not get home?
Life goes on. Track practices every day after school. Homework is due. College applications are due. But my friend is missing. And the world goes on. Teachers are not stopping. The city's not stopping. I've talked to people even now, present day, who said, "Mister, that was a very scary time for Black girls in Philly because we did not know what happened to her. So now we're getting off trolleys. Now we're taking our earrings off." Everybody's guard was up. Not just William Penn, not just Overbrook students, but this is a citywide thing now where one of the most popular girls in the city is missing. Imagine what that did to the anxiety levels of Black girls.
In Philadelphia, investigators have traced 17-year-old Shelly Turner's last known whereabouts to a bus stop 6 blocks from her home.
It was very late. Shelly was a young woman out by herself. It was a kind of rough neighborhood because there were a lot of alleyways and there were a lot of vacant houses.
Anything could have happened to Shelly from the time she got off the bus to the time she would have been able to reach her front door.
Police scour every inch between the bus stop and Shelly's home.
They searched the vacant houses, they searched the alleys looking for her. And they would have checked stores, checked neighbors.
Meanwhile, investigators interview Shelly's coach, Tim Hickey. He's deeply troubled over the disappearance of his protege.
Coach Hickey had known her for so many years and was, had such a deep knowledge of all the girls that he had on his track team.
She would talk to him and tell him things that perhaps she didn't tell anyone else. So there was a bond there. There was a trust.
Coach Hickey reveals that Shelly's relationship with Vivian was troubled.
It was not the greatest situation in her house. There was an amount of conflict between Shelly and Vivian. Shelly had to bring her sister to practices and some of the meets that she had to go to because Vivian had made Shelly be a primary babysitter.
She was not seeing eye to eye with her mother regarding, her expectations, her curfews, and the things that she wanted in her household.
Coach Hickey reports that Shelly hadn't shown up the morning of the track meet.
Shelly was the only one that was not there. So Mr. Hickey, her coach, went to the house looking for Shelly to take with him along with the rest of the team on the van.
Shelly's little sister answered the door. Coach Hickey never saw Vivian, but she called out from upstairs.
Vivian informed him that Shelly had not come home the night before.
Vivian said, "She's not here. Check with Kwanda." Kwanda is Shelly's friend who was also on the team with her.
But Coach Hickey tells the investigators that Kwanda didn't know where Shelly was either. Detectives find it odd that Vivian knew Shelly hadn't shown up at the track meet the morning after she went missing. Not 2 days later, like she told police.
I think it would have been imperative that any caring parent would have notified the police immediately to begin an investigation to try to locate the child.
There is a question as to why Vivian waited so long. What was the reason for that?
As investigators continue to search for the missing teen, They get a phone call from Shelley's friend, Andrea.
Her girlfriend's, the one whose jacket it was, saw Clarence Jones wearing that jacket later and didn't understand how he would have gotten that jacket if Shelley never got home.
The fact would be that if the jacket was subsequently seen several days later, it meant that Shelley had come back to the house with that jacket. That directed our attention more to Clarence at that point in time as being possibly involved in what had happened with Shelley.
Detectives bring in Clarence for questioning.
Clarence explained that he just picked up a jacket that he saw in the living room. He didn't know whose it was. He just saw this jacket and he put it on.
Clarence is very adamant about the fact that he just grabbed the first jacket that he saw and that there were other jackets, black jackets, in the home.
Clarence says that on the night Shelley went missing, he got up at 2:30 a.m. to get ready for work.
And Shelley still wasn't home. And he kept asking, "Where's Shelley? Where's Shelley?" And Vivian didn't know.
He delivered newspapers in the mornings. He would be gone from approximately 3 a.m. until he was finished his paper route.
Clarence's employer verifies his alibi.
Because of the timeline, it would not be possible for Clarence to have been home if Shelley did, in fact, go back to her house the night that she went missing.
The search of the 6 blocks between Shelley's house and the bus stop is also a dead end.
They have no leads. The Philadelphia department has 0.
It became an everyday focus of the media here in Philadelphia of what happened to Shelley, where is Shelley?
Now flyers are going up. They're hanging them on telephone poles. There were marches, people were walking, they were looking, they were knocking on doors.
This particular community came together and raised $6,000. This neighborhood is not a neighborhood of affluence, you know, there's not a lot of money going around. But people were very invested. They wanted to find Shelley. Days turns into weeks, and now people are becoming desperate, and people want answers. People want Shelley to be alive. They want to find her alive.
It's February 1993. Shelley Turner has been missing for 4 weeks. Speculation runs wild through her West Philadelphia neighborhood.
She might have been grabbed. She might have been held captive. She might have been killed. She might have run away.
The city, especially the West Detective Division and the uniform districts in West Philadelphia, were in a constant search for Shelley.
As the community continues to look for the 17-year-old track star, taking center stage is her mother, Vivian.
She's a local celebrity. People hear her on the radio, they read about her in the newspaper, they've seen her on TV.
There were marches led by Miss King, and she was very much in the news media, presenting herself to them as a grieving mother.
Behind closed doors, Vivian is less optimistic.
I started going to Vivian King's house, of course, with my teammates, but after a while, like as the days go on, as the weeks go on, the crowds get smaller. The visits are fewer. So there were times I went by myself. She would say, "We're never gonna see Shay again." She said, "Mister, this is bad." I said, "Don't say that." You know, as a 17-year-old, I'm like, no. We're gonna work this out. She said, "I feel it in my gut. We ain't never gonna see her again." She was very negative about ever seeing her daughter again. And of course, that made me very sad. That made me very upset.
On February 20th, 33 days after Shelley went missing, the case takes a grim turn.
A man was out walking his dog in the Fairmount Park area of Philadelphia near the Mann Music Center.
You're talking about a huge open area with trees. That area is very well populated in the summer, but not so much in the winter.
The dog was acting strange and pulled the man into an area where there were some trees, a wooded area.
The dog guides him toward a blue tarp, streaked with what appears to be dried blood.
When the man went to investigate, he found what appeared to be the remains of a human being.
Within minutes, the park is swarming with law enforcement. They see what appears to be the body of a young female.
Her body was frozen because it was a very, very cold period of time here in Philadelphia. The type of sweatshirt she had on was an inside out. It was on inside out. The pants she had were somewhat of track kind of clothing. Also, there were no footwear. To us, it appeared to us that, she had dressed very, very quickly to leave wherever she had been prior to being there in the park. It was recognized that it very possibly could be the body of Shelley Turner.
While the cause of death isn't clear, wounds to the victim's face and head indicate foul play.
There was indications of blunt force trauma. The way that her hands were found with her body being frozen, her hand was up in front of her face as if she were trying to ward off the attack.
Investigators do not locate any other evidence.
So at that point, they didn't have any conclusive answers.
The next day, Vivian comes to the morgue.
Her body did not deteriorate because of the cold, because she was frozen.
Vivian is shown 5 pictures. They're Polaroids. So based off those 5 pictures, Vivian does in fact identify Shelley Turner as the young woman that they found in Fairmount Park.
The medical examiner determines a cause of death.
Shelley was hit in the head with an object, and then she was shot 6 times.
She has some shots through her chest, through her head, and through her left hand.
Now it's a homicide. And we would start back at the very beginning and re-interview everyone.
The day after she IDs her daughter's body, homicide detectives meet with Vivian at her home.
She was very adamant that we should look into Sean because she related to us that night that she believed Sean lied to her.
Vivian tells detectives she called Sean after Shelley disappeared.
According to her, Sean had made a sausage sandwich for Shelley while she was there, and Vivian inquired whether it was pork or beef, and according to Sean initially, it was a pork sandwich. And then when she questioned him more about the kind of sandwich, he eventually said, oh, perhaps it might have been a beef sandwich. And she felt that was extremely important because, according to Vivian, Shelley was allergic to pork. And when we left the house, that was going to be our next step. We knew that Sean was going to be someone that we wanted to speak to.
This goes from a missing juvenile case to now a homicide. It was heartbreaking for this to be the end. After all the searching, after all the posters, track teams from everywhere, going out there trying to find Shelley Turner. People are shocked by this information. People are mourning. The whole community, the whole city is invested. They've been searching for her.
After learning that her daughter's missing persons case has just been declared a homicide, Vivian King encourages police to look again at her daughter's suitor, Sean Williams.
We went to his residence, and then we asked Sean if he would come with us to homicide to give a formal statement, and he agreed to do that.
I'm a 17-year-old kid at this time, so I'm not thinking about if you're trying to ask me questions to trick me up or anything like that. I have no sense of that at all. Like, I'm just answering your questions as honestly as I possibly can. And I just wanted to help.
He also agreed to be polygraphed.
I didn't have anything to hide. I wasn't scared.
The person conducting the test informed us that there was no deception indicated by Sean, and that it was the operator's belief that he was telling the truth, that Shelley had gotten on the bus that evening when she disappeared and was last seen by Sean at that point in time. It was not Sean. Sean had no hand in whatsoever what had happened to Shelley.
Shelley's funeral takes place on February 27th. Over 1,200 people turn out.
It was with teenagers everywhere, just bawling their eyes out, just losing it. It was a mess. It was probably one of the worst days of our young lives. There was very little emotion with Vivian King. You know, maybe a tear trickled, maybe. We were like overwhelmed with grief, and this woman was sitting there with a tight jaw and a tight face. Nobody hugged Vivian King. Nobody talked to her.
Well, I'm hearing rumors of her mom being jealous. They don't get along. I'm hearing, just rumors of her mom just not being a good person at all.
The whispers and stares don't go unnoticed.
About a week and a half after Shelley's body had been discovered, Vivian called. She was hearing rumors, and she wanted to know how she could dispel those rumors. We went over everything again, everything that had transpired from the day that Shelley was last seen. And she related to us how she had cooked dinner, and she right away said she made pork chops, peas, and potatoes, mashed potatoes. Vivian obviously did not remember that she had told us that Shelley had been allergic to pork. Vivian herself was lying. She was trying to direct us towards Sean.
But why? Unaware she was just caught in a lie, Vivian continues her quest to clear her name.
She had mentioned that she had been told that she could take a lie detector test. Vivian, at that point in time, was very adamant she wanted to take that because she believed that she could then tell people she took a polygraph test and passed the test and had nothing to do with what had happened to Shelley.
Results were she had flunked.
We informed her that there was deception indicated, that she was not telling the truth. Vivian started telling us at that point that there were things she just didn't remember. Bits and pieces would come back to her, but she was telling us she just had trouble remembering everything from that night.
Detectives questioned Vivian for hours.
We quietly reviewed with her the problems with her story. The pork chop, Shelley being allergic to that. Also the fact that the black jacket was seen being worn by Clarence days after Shelley had supposedly left and never returned to the house. Vivian, was actually recognizing that the lies that she had told and that none of them were going to hold up. And at that point, she basically was willing to say what had happened.
Vivian tells police that on Sunday, January 17th, she had been out with friends.
She had consumed quite a bit of liquor, and she was also telling us how she had a problem with liquor. When she came home that evening, she found that Shelley had left to go to the party.
Shelley's 1 a.m. curfew came and went.
Vivian waited up for a long period of time and was getting angrier and angrier.
Shelley got into the house about 2:30, having walked from the bus stop. When she got home, her mother and she got into an argument about what time she had come in, and they got into a fight.
And they start kind of tussling back and forth.
Vivian then went upstairs and got her own gun from under her mattress and went downstairs and then confronted Shelley again.
Vivian says that she hit Shelley in the head with the gun and then tells Shelley, "You can't live here anymore. You're not following my rules."
Her mother said, "I'm going to take you to the police station and they're going to put you in a home for bad girls." So she made her get into the car.
The arguing continued.
Vivian claims that she got so angry that she did not go to the police station. She was gonna go fight Shelley.
She then drove into the park. She drove some distance across the grass, according to her, stopped near some trees.
Vivian King made Shelley get out of the car in the park. And they said, "Okay, we're going to fight here." And they actually got into a fist fight.
Shelley had picked up a bottle from the ground, and when she did, Vivian then hit Shelley on the side of the head again with the gun.
Shelley fell to the ground, stunned by the blow.
And while she was laying on the ground, Vivian fired her gun.
Vivian took her gun and shot Shelley 6 times, killing her. She then left her under a tarp that was in the park and some weeds and things, and then went home.
She put her gun back under her mattress and went to sleep.
She says she wakes up the next morning and feels like she just had a bad nightmare.
She had a look of resignation on her face. She was sobbing periodically, but never did I see an actual tear.
Vivian King is arrested and charged with Shelley's murder.
When the news broke that she confessed, of course, that like rocked everybody's world. Now all I see is pure evil.
But just days later, at her arraignment, Vivian pleads not guilty.
She says the confession was coerced.
After confessing to shooting her 17-year-old daughter to death in a park, Vivian King now claims her confession was coerced. She sticks by her innocence until October 20th, 1993, when her trial begins.
I'm arguing for first-degree murder, for life as the penalty. I really thought 6 shots was enough for murder 1.
The case hinges on Vivian's confession, a confession she now claims isn't true.
They had no evidence. They had nothing to tie her to it. They didn't have the gun, and they had nothing to convict her except for the confession.
Prosecutors call multiple witnesses who attest to Vivian's well-known temper.
She liked to drink. That was her sport. She liked to go to bars. She liked to fraternize in bars.
When she did drink, she knew that she got angry, and most of her anger was always directed at Shelley.
Shelley was a star. Shelley shined on that track.
She was very jealous of Shelley.
Coach Hickey testifies that Shelley was one of the best runners in the country, in spite of her mother.
She was one of the few parents, I think, who did not go to the meets.
Prosecutors present Vivian's confession as proof of what happened when tension between mother and daughter came to a head.
It was so horrifyingly specific that you're not going to come to the great detail of that kind of confession unless you really did it.
Vivian takes the stand.
Her defense is, I didn't say this willingly. I was coerced into this confession.
Vivian claims the only part of the confession that's true is that she was drunk.
In total, Vivian has had about 88 ounces of liquor over the course of those hours. That's about 11 cups.
Her attorneys argue that Shelley probably fell victim to a random act of violence.
There was conversation about this possibly being a robbery. She did not have her shoes. She did not have a Walkman that Andrea, her friend from across the street, had loaned her. She was missing an earring.
The jury deliberates for 6 hours.
Ultimately, the jury found her guilty of third-degree murder.
It's very hard for a jury to believe that a mother who has raised a daughter 17 years intends to kill her, even with 6 shots to the head and the body. It's just hard. It's easier for them to think, okay, she was drunk, but she didn't really intend for her to die.
It's just mind-boggling to think that a mother could stand over her daughter and shoot her, but we believed the confession.
Vivian is sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison. She's released after 11 years.
What happened with Shelley, I believe, that time of my life, it stunted my growth. I'm still mourning.
She was a real person who had real dreams. Her story deserves to be told. I think her legacy deserves to be heard.
He played tackle in high school and guard. All of our dreams at one time was to make it to the NFL. But life don't always happen that way, you know. My brother meant the world to me. Anybody I love meant the world to me. And he was the same way. Jabbar was.
Broad daylight on a summer afternoon, somebody's gunned down.
There's a young black man laying in a pool of his own blood, fighting for his life.
He certainly couldn't talk, but he's trying to write something on his arm in his own blood.
There was a lot of information coming in. The name kept coming up.
It's what police sometimes call a street name.
Every time they see each other, they're at each other's necks, like two boxers in a ring.
Somebody was going to be hurt or killed.
As a young man, there's this need to defend and protect your territory.
He wasn't going to allow him to breathe another day.
It's June 5th, 1995. A quiet summer afternoon in Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Colorado Springs back in the 1990s was a nice little town, not a whole lot of crime.
It's just a normal day where, everybody's kind of tending their business, commuting, routine type day.
Just after 3:30 p.m., the routine is interrupted.
There was a flood of 911 calls coming in, reporting a shooting.
There was a black man who got shot right in front of the Champion auto parts store right there by the front door.
The area where this happened was a nice part of town.
Usually where people feel really safe, the last thing they're thinking is that they're going to be a witness to serious gun violence.
Patrol officers with Colorado Springs Police Department arrive at the location.
There's a young black man laying in a pool of his own blood, and he is fighting for his life.
There were several witnesses that heard the gunshots or even saw what happened, rushed over to render aid.
Our victim was laying on the ground, was still alive at the time, trying to breathe. He's gasping for air.
And then the EMTs arrived. And of course, they put him on a gurney and they took him, I think, to Memorial Hospital.
When I got there, I could see that the area was cordoned off with police evidence tape. I interviewed a few people. They heard the shots, which happened right outside the front door to the west of the Champion Auto Parts store. They observed two black males. One had a gun and basically shot the other one a number of times. And then this individual ran to the north and disappeared. And no one could give me a good description other than a young, possibly around 20-year-old black male with a white shirt on.
With the shooter at large, police immediately launch a search.
There were only like 3 little businesses in this short strip mall. Moving past those businesses, the next location would be an apartment complex, fairly large complex to the north, and that's apparently where the suspect kind of disappeared. So of course we searched that area. We actually used a dog. We had a canine officer come.
At the scene, a man pulls into the parking lot and asks to speak with the detectives.
He was driving by the auto parts store, saw all the police activity there, and noticed that his brother's car was parked in the parking lot with police tape around it.
He begins to talk to police, and he's saying, "Hey, that's my brother's car."
I got a phone call from one of my cousins, and he said there's a lot of police at the auto parts store, and he thinks something happened to Jabbar. And so I rushed over there. They wouldn't tell me nothing. No, but I knew in my heart that it was Jabbar.
Antoine Jabbar McKenzie was born on January 15, 1975, in Colorado Springs.
Jabbar was one of 3. He was the baby of the family, and he grew up with this close-knit family with his siblings.
We got a pretty big family. We all grew up together, the whole block. We had my aunt and uncle on the corner. My Uncle Larry stayed next door to them. My cousin Kelly and Junior stayed a house down from them. And then on the other street, we had cousins.
Jabbar and his brothers were inseparable.
We was always together. If you seen one, you seen us all. I remember one time, we all snuck off from B Street and walked all the way to the mountains over there, followed the creek all the way up to the mountains. And we made it home. It was a little dark. And my mom, it was like, "Where was y'all at?" We went to the mountains. And Jabbar was like, "Yeah, Mom, I'm tired." My dad and Mom took us fishing. We did a lot of fishing, camping. They always made sure my mom would always take us fishing, you know. And I remember there's a time too, Jabbar, we was fishing and he sat on the hook. And my mom had to take him to the hospital because he couldn't get it out.
When Jabbar was 17, his parents separated.
I was 20 at the time. They said they stayed together to raise us so we'd be together.
They did this until the point where they figured that the kids could be on their own, make their own decisions, and they would be good. And it was at that point where Mom and Dad separated. Mom went to live in Texas. Dad stayed here in Colorado.
Jabbar stayed in Colorado Springs, where he attended Palmer High School.
Jabbar had a love for football. You know, he was real passionate about it. You start getting that recognition that people start noticing you and you start feeling good about yourself. Your self-esteem gets good. So I think he was enjoying that.
He played tackle in high school and guard, and he was pretty good. All of our dreams at one time was to make it to the NFL, but life don't always happen that way.
Unfortunately, he dropped out of school in his senior year. Some people, that came as a surprise to him because he was such a good football player and enjoyed it. But all of a sudden, he decides to drop out of school.
Jabbar took a job working with his father, who owned a construction company.
They pour concrete, and my dad taught him how to operate equipment. Basically, hard labor, that's what we do.
Jabbar eventually moved in with his grandma, and it was at that point where he walked in his independence. He was paying bills. He was the man of the house.
With hard-earned cash in his pocket, Jabbar splurged and bought himself a vintage muscle car.
He worked tirelessly in order to pay that thing off. He would continue to fix it up to get it just right.
I remember one day, I said, I'm gonna get my car painted. I said, we gonna sand it, you know, this, and so we didn't know what we was doing. So by the end of it, we had all kinds of grind marks all over the car and everything. And he was like, man, we messed this car up.
Jabbar had plans to take the car on a road trip.
The whole plan is for us leaving. My cousin got him a job at the prison to be a prison guard. So he was gonna go to Texas to be a prison guard.
But on the day he planned to leave, his brother, Eric, is in the parking lot of an auto parts store trying to find out if the man who was just shot is Jabbar.
The victim's brother talks to police and says, this could be my brother. I see his car.
He was told then that the person that was associated with that car had been shot and transported to the hospital.
The brother, understandably, is very, freaked out and rushes right to the hospital.
Investigators continue to speak to witnesses. They learn that the shooter might not be on foot after all.
There's a witness on the scene who was across the street filling up his truck at a gas station, heard what he thought was a backfire, looks over and he sees this guy pointing at our victim, and he hears a succession of 6 gunshots, and then sees our victim fall to the ground. He looks down the street and sees the person he saw confronting our victim running down the street and get into the passenger side of a white car.
It had no hubcaps and was being driven by a black male, and it was like spinning out.
The suspect got into the passenger side of that car and they left the area.
Investigators stay on the lookout for the white sedan. Then, detectives learn from witnesses who tried to render him aid that the victim might have tried to leave a clue.
He certainly couldn't talk, but he's bleeding pretty badly, and he's trying to write something on his arm in his own blood.
With the last strength that he has, he is trying to tell people what happened to him.
It clearly indicated that he knew and he was trying to put that information out.
Today's shooting in Colorado Springs has left a young man suspected to be 20-year-old Jabbar McKenzie at a nearby hospital fighting for his life. Speaking with witnesses, investigators learned the victim may have attempted to communicate a clue about the shooter before losing consciousness.
He is hit and he falls to the ground. There's a lot of blood, and bystanders run to him to help him. And he tries to write something on his arm. He writes with his own blood.
When we find out that that's happened, we call the hospital. We want to see what it is.
They learn they will have to wait until after he undergoes emergency surgery.
So from there, my next assignment would be to do the scene itself. So I started having the scene photographed. That's kind of the first thing you do.
There was a car parked in the parking lot that ended up belonging to our victim, and that's why he had gone to the auto parts store to get the thermostat.
We started noticing what appeared to be .22 caliber spent casings. We collected 10 of those casings. Some of them were toward the driver's side of the vehicle, some were at the rear of the vehicle, and some were actually on the passenger side of the vehicle. So it appeared as though whoever was firing, they must have fired fairly close to the individual, and then as they backed up away, they continued firing. Therefore, the casings were, strewn around the car, and then apparently ran to the north.
Investigators also locate some cash in the thermostat on the ground.
So it certainly appeared that the individual, the victim in this case, had been in the store, probably purchased the thermostat, and on the way to his car was confronted by this black individual with the white shoe.
Well, it was apparent it wasn't a robbery because he still had money in his hand, and he had an auto part, a thermostat that he had purchased. So you're looking at this, and your thoughts are, well, what happened here? This wasn't a robbery. This was a targeted attack. Broad daylight on a summer afternoon in the middle of a parking lot, somebody's gunned down. This was some kind of a hit.
If the young man did see who attacked him, investigators learn he won't be able to share that with police.
Jabbar McKenzie is pronounced dead at 3:50 p.m. He sustained 6 gunshot wounds to the chest. One of those gunshots went through his heart and another through his lungs.
Investigators head to the hospital, hopeful to take a look at the victim's arm.
By the time we get there speared, we can't make anything out. But the one witness that saw the shooting says he saw it looked like it was either a J or a K or O.
Having gotten word of the shooting from Eric, Jabbar McKenzie's family gathers at the hospital.
A man and an elderly lady show up at the hospital, and they're saying, we want to see our son. And it's at that time that they're notified that, well, the person that was brought in is deceased, is no longer alive.
A family member had made an identification of the body, and it was Jabbar McKenzie.
The day that he passed away, we were supposed to leave that day. My brother meant the world to me. Anybody I love meant the world to me, and I go out the way for him if I have to. And he was the same way. Jabbar was.
Mr. McKenzie loses it. His son is now gone. His son is dead. Anybody would have that reaction.
He said that, he wants to know what's going on, and he knows who did this, and he's going to get him, and the detective's trying to calm him down and say, that's not the way to handle this, let us handle this. And Everett walks out of the room. Well, Viola, the Jabbar's grandmother's still there, so detectives start talking to her and trying to find out some background on Jabbar.
Grandma told police that Jabbar, he didn't get into a lot of trouble. He didn't hang out with any gangs. According to Grandma, he was just a sweet young man.
Everett McKenzie comes back into the room. He's calmed down now and would like to help out however he can to find out who did this to his son. He said that that Jabbar had been having troubles for years, ever since high school, with a kid named Kelvin Washington. And he felt that maybe Kelvin was involved in the shooting.
Detectives learned that 19-year-old Kelvin Andre Washington lives a few blocks from the crime scene on Tahoe Boulevard.
Now we need to go talk to Kelvin Washington to find out what can he tell us about this homicide. Was he involved in this?
After 20-year-old Jabbar McKenzie is brazenly shot down in broad daylight, investigators look into an alleged enemy from his days at Palmer High.
I ended up at around 9 o'clock, like 6 hours after the shooting, going to the Tahoe address where we thought we could find Kelvin Washington. And there were a number of other people in the living room area, and one of them was Kelvin Washington. So it wasn't comfortable to be talking to him with all these people. So we traveled to the basement with him and started learning a few things.
His reaction kind of surprised the detectives because he says, I thought you'd be coming by here to talk to me. Oh, really? You're going to tell us you were involved in this? What's going on? And he says, no, I'll tell you, it's common knowledge on the street that myself and Jabbar do not get along. But I did not kill Jabbar. He's a typical 20-year-old, wears glasses, and seems to be an all-around kind of guy, you know. I'm here to help you out. I wasn't involved in this. The detectives asked him, well, you know, would you come downtown and talk to us about this? It's better than, you know, us having to talk to you here at your house. Sure. He was very cooperative. He said, I'll meet you guys down there.
At the station, police asked Kelvin to submit to a GSR test.
The gunshot residue test is where police can swab someone's hands and determine they could be the shooter. Kelvin agrees to do that.
While police process the results, Kelvin gives a statement about his history with Jabbar.
He's being very polite, very cooperative, you know, answering all of their questions.
Kelvin says the conflict started when they were both still in high school.
It sounds like Kelvin's girlfriend may have hit on Jabbar. And through that, Jabbar went and talked to Kelvin about it.
Jabbar went to Kelvin to tell him, like, hey man, your girlfriend is hitting on me. You might want to watch her. When Kelvin confronts his girlfriend about what Jabbar was saying, she denies it. And this makes Kelvin upset. He goes back to Jabbar and says, hey man, stay out of my relationship. I don't want to have anything else to do with you. You stay away from me, you stay away from her. Jabbar was not one to back down from a threat. And he saw this as a threat. And so now Kelvin becomes an enemy.
So what started as high school rivalry quickly escalated to an incident where Jabbar showed up at Kelvin's house to fight him.
Kelvin Washington's mom came out on the front porch and had to tell Jabbar, you know, leave. I don't want you around here messing with my son. He doesn't want to fight you. Get out of here. And Jabbar leaves.
It escalated to the point where Kelvin says that Jabbar started bullying him. He started throwing bricks at his car. We have two teenage boys here, and they are feuding. Every time they see each other in school, they're at each other's necks, like two boxers in a ring.
It's clear the two young men didn't like each other. But is a high school beef motive for murder?
In order to arrest someone, there's three basic elements that you have to establish. A motive, an opportunity, and the means to commit the crime.
With motive in question, investigators focus on opportunity.
First thing I wanted to do was kind of track his day. What did you do today?
Kelvin says that he was living with his girlfriend and their baby at the time. He woke up, he played some video games that morning, and around 12:30, he left the house to go pick up his green Cadillac. Police think this is a really important detail because the car observed at the shooting was a white sedan, not a green Cadillac.
Kelvin says he spent the afternoon at his stepfather's house on Tahoe Boulevard, where he still was when the shooting took place.
Kelvin also tells police that his family was in and out of the house all day, and this would help confirm Kelvin's alibi because they would have seen Kelvin in the house.
Detectives consider whether Kelvin had the means to commit the crime.
One of the questions they ask is, do you own a gun? Kelvin says, yes, I do.
This is Colorado. This is the Wild West, so to speak. Lots of people own guns in Color Springs, so it's not unusual for a 20-year-old to own a gun.
But it's a .380, which again is not the murder weapon. He agrees to actually give the police his own gun if they want to test it and compare it to that .22 caliber shell casing they found. Kelvin is calm, he is agreeing to cooperate, and police often view that kind of demeanor as someone who's not guilty, who is just trying to show that they're innocent.
But just before Kelvin Washington leaves, the results of his GSR test come back.
Detective Hilty came into the room and informed me and in front of Mr. Washington that he came back positive for gunshot residue. I asked him how he was going to explain that. How do you explain you have gunshot residue on you?
He said, I was at the range the other day with my buddy, and I was shooting my .380, so I'd probably have gunshot residue on my hand.
Kelvin promises to return at 3 p.m. the following day with his .380.
He agreed to bring that gun in the next day and turn it over to me so we could examine it. That was pretty much the first interview that night with Mr. Washington. I actually drove him home.
There's no reason to hold him. They got no information that he's the actual shooter in this case. And he's being cooperative, so they're going to let him go.
With Kelvin seemingly in the clear, investigators have no leads until a tip comes in.
There was a lot of information coming in, some to uniformed officers, some to detectives, but the name Nebo kept coming up.
Police quickly understand that Nebo is not a proper name. It's what police sometimes call a street name. The person who committed this murder, the person who shot Jabbar, is named Nebo.
Looking into the death of Jabbar McKenzie, have just received a tip that a man who goes by the nickname Nebo is responsible for his death.
A lot of times the only way they're going to find out is if they, hit the pavement, start their networking, and try to figure out who Nebo is.
Detectives were contacted by a local FBI agent who said that he had some information that may be related to this homicide, and that he had an informant that had this information and would be willing to share this information. So the detectives met with the informant, and that's when they first learned that Kelvin Washington was also known as Nebo on the streets.
Detectives look into the alibi Kelvin gave in his initial interview.
He's being very cooperative. He says he's got an alibi. He was home all day. You never take a suspect's word for the fact that he didn't do this. He gives you an alibi, you investigate that alibi now and determine if he's telling the truth.
When they take a close look at Kelvin's statement, they note a discrepancy.
I noticed when he talks about the time period of around 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock in the afternoon on Monday, the 5th, there's nobody else at the house apparently.
Jabbar was shot just before 3:30 p.m.
He claims he was there and never left. So that, kind of piques your interest.
The next day at 3 p.m., Kelvin Washington returns to the police station as promised.
He conveniently forgot to bring the .380 and again claimed he didn't know exactly where it was anyway, but went into a little more detail about the issues he'd had over the years with Jabbar.
Kelvin Washington mentioned at one point he and a friend of his went to Bumper's Lounge one night, and lo and behold, Jabbar was there in the parking lot. And Kelvin said, we need to get out of here. I don't want any confrontation to go in here because I know something's going to happen if he sees me out here. So they left the parking lot. But Jabbar follows them out of the parking lot. And it's almost like a chase is going on where he's trying to get away from Jabbar, but Jabbar is following him. And he said it got to the point where Jabbar actually pulled a gun out and started shooting. He said nobody in the car was hit, but his car was hit 2 times.
Kelvin tells police the incident rattled him. He went to stay with his mother in Tennessee for a couple of months, hoping that Jabbar's temper would cool in the meantime.
He drove that car to Memphis to visit his mother, and she actually had the car painted and repaired to cover up those 2 bullet holes while he was down there. So it was documented that there was 2 bullet holes in that car.
But when he returned to Colorado Springs, Jabbar was anything but cool.
Kelvin tells police that Jabbar followed Kelvin's girlfriend back to her apartment, probably looking for him. And Kelvin says at this point, that's the last straw.
He explained that things had escalated recently to the point that either Thursday or Friday, Jabbar had driven by the Tahoe address, fired some shots at the house. He claims that this was witnessed by the stepfather, and then, of course, he goes to the range and does some practice.
When things like this ends up with weapons and guns being involved, people feel that they need to defend and protect themselves. As a young man, there's this need to defend and protect your territory.
Kelvin claims he was ready to defend himself if he had to, but maintains he did not kill Jabbar. And investigators aren't convinced.
And does he have the means? Well, he has a weapon. He practiced on Friday, so that's kind of circumstantial evidence, but we need more than that to make an arrest.
He was asked if he'd be willing to take a polygraph on the statements he was given.
During that second interview, we'd arranged for Nebo, Mr. Washington, to come in on the 7th, and he agreed to do a polygraph.
But before he comes back, detectives get a phone call that changes everything.
They find out who may have owned this white car that they saw leaving the crime scene. They contact a juvenile who was known to be associated with that car.
This informant happens to be a juvenile, a person under the age of 18.
So they went to his house and contacted his mother and said, you know, we'd like to talk to your son. We're investigating this homicide case. He may be involved, he might not, but we'd like to talk to him. She said, sure, come on in, you can talk to him.
At this point, Mom calls him out and tells him that he needs to give police whatever information that they need. He's kind of hesitant because he knows that according to street law, you're not supposed to talk to police, but Mom pushes him to do the right thing.
Well, the kid's mother says, you be honest with these police officers, tell them what happened. And during that interview, he says, yes, he was with Kelvin Washington that particular day.
On June 7th, 1995, Colorado Springs police interview a witness who says he was with Kelvin Washington on the afternoon Jabbar McKenzie was killed.
And he was with a guy named Big Will. Big Will was a friend of Kelvin Washington.
He claimed that the three of them, Big Will, Nebo, and himself, were driving around in the white car and they were looking for marijuana.
Nebo was wearing a white t-shirt and jeans, which is important information for the police. Other witnesses say that the shooter was also wearing white t-shirt and jeans.
He said as they're driving down the street, Kelvin Washington is telling them which way to go, and all of a sudden Kelvin says, stop the car and let me out.
They ended up dropping Nebo off somewhere west of the Champion Auto Parts store. Claims the other two drove around a bit.
He says about 10 or 15 minutes later, they come back and pick Kelvin Washington up.
Nebo got back in the vehicle and they left.
He says Kelvin has scored some marijuana, so then they go back to Kelvin's house and they're there the rest of the day. Nothing about any shooting, and he doesn't know about any shooting, didn't hear any gunshots, so doesn't know anything about that.
Detectives suspect that during the 15 minutes, Kelvin shot and killed Jabbar.
They were all together, and they dropped Kelvin Washington off right at the scene of the murder, and then the murder happens.
But the juvenile claims to know nothing about the actual killing.
I don't think that it was as innocent as what it was portrayed, but it was the best evidence that was going to be available to us at the time.
As they wrap up with the witness, investigators receive news that Kelvin Washington is at the police station taking a polygraph test.
I went back to police headquarters, met up with the other detectives, and immediately learned that Mr. Washington, Nebo, had failed his polygraph. So now we've got the polygraph failure, we've got the gunshot residue on his hands on Monday, we've got his presence at the scene on Monday when the crime occurred, we got a witness that puts him there, and we certainly have the motive.
It was determined then to present this case to our assistant district attorney at the time, who reviewed it and said, yeah, we're going to get a warrant and have him arrested.
On the evening of June 7th, just over 48 hours after the murder of Jabbar McKenzie, detectives confront Kelvin Washington with the new evidence against him.
Detectives are telling him, you know, we can put you in this area. No, I wasn't there. I was with Big Will and this juvenile. We were driving around, but we never went by that auto parts store. They never let me out. None of that stuff happened. The detective was saying, well, you know, we have evidence to the contrary, and we don't believe you. And that's when he said, you know what, I'm done with this interview and I'm leaving. No, you're not. We have a warrant for your arrest, charging with murder. You're under arrest and we're taking you into custody.
With Kelvin in custody, investigators trained their sights on locating the third person in the suspect vehicle, a man known as Big Will.
We were looking for Big Will as technically a witness, but somebody we thought could potentially be a co-defendant in this case.
Is he helping Kelvin Washington set up this homicide? Is he now driving a getaway car for Kelvin Washington to get away? Another confidential informant was contacted who said that he had seen Kelvin Washington and Big Will on that particular day, and that he had told Big Will that he would take him to the bus depot because Big Will was leaving Colorado Springs that afternoon to go back to Memphis. He picked Big Will up at Kelvin Washington's house, loaded up 6 boxes that he had with him that he was going to put on the bus. He noticed that the case for that .22 caliber pistol was in one of the boxes. He didn't actually see the pistol, but he did see the case for the pistol. So he assumed that the pistol was there and that Big Will was taking it back to Memphis with him.
Based on shell casings found at the crime scene, detectives know Jabbar McKenzie was killed with a .22.
Nebo claimed that he had a .380, not a .22 caliber.
Now we know that Big Will had a .22. Did Big Will give that .22 to Kelvin Washington to shoot Jabbar with?
The witness gives investigators Big Will's cell phone number.
Investigators were actually able to contact Big Will in Memphis. The investigator said, well, would you be willing to come back to Colorado Springs and talk to us? Well, yeah, I'll be willing to. He kind of backtracked on that, and we couldn't get a hold of him anymore.
Myself and another detective from CSPD, we went down to Memphis.
We were unable to locate him, so we told the local authorities, you know, we need this guy back here on this murder case. If we can find him, pick him up, and that's what happened.
On June 13th, 1995, 8 days after the death of Jabbar McKenzie, suspected accomplice Big Will is taken into custody in Memphis.
We first talked to him on the telephone, and he was kind of hesitant about talking to my investigator, but did admit that, yes, he was with Kelvin Washington that day, and that he was driving, and the juvenile was in the back seat. But he says, we didn't shoot anybody. We were just out looking for some marijuana. Okay, well, we're going to bring you back and have you tell this story in court.
As with the juvenile, investigators have no proof that Big Will was an accomplice or even knew the shooting took place.
If we would have been able to charge him from an evidentiary standpoint by then, we would have, and he knew that.
Big Will makes his way back to Colorado, and so does the alleged murder weapon.
We were able to acquire the gun that Big Will had in his possession, and that was the .22 caliber handgun that we're certain was involved in the commission of the crime.
We were able to get that .22 caliber back, make the matches that were necessary. So there was our .22 caliber, which was really the only missing piece of evidence, was the actual gun itself.
In January 1996, Kelvin Washington goes on trial for the first-degree murder of Jabbar McKenzie. Prosecutors put eyewitnesses from the crime scene on the stand.
They were able to identify what the assailant was wearing. They were able to identify what kind of car they were driving. They were able to identify which direction he ran in.
But the defense claims that even though Kelvin matches the description given by witnesses, police arrested the wrong man.
At trial, it was the defense's theory of the case that this was not Kelvin Washington, that this was a case of mistaken identity.
Prosecutors allege that what started as a beef between two high school kids escalated until Kelvin sought the ultimate revenge.
He was tired of it. He was tired of being shot at. His car was being shot at. His mother's house was being shot at. He was just tired of all that.
When Kelvin saw Jabbar at the store, he saw his chance to put a permanent end to the feud.
Kelvin saw this as his opportunity to take Jabbar's life. He wasn't going to allow him to get back in the car and walk away and breathe another day.
You can't pull out a gun and go stalk somebody and shoot them 6 times because you're being bullied.
It seemed that the prosecution had the stronger of the 2 cases. But at the very end, you just never know exactly what the jury's going to come back with.
Ultimately, Kelvin Washington was found guilty of first-degree murder, and in Colorado, that carries a mandatory penalty of life in prison without the possibility of parole, which is where he was sentenced to.
Most homicides, the victim knows their perpetrator. And in this case, it wasn't a family member, it was a known enemy. This is going to be a situation of 2 people where one's going to be a victim and one's going to be a perpetrator. There's going to be a life spent and there's going to be a life ruined. And in this case, Jabbar's life was spent and Nebo's life was ruined.
It was just inevitable that somebody was going to be hurt or killed. And now we know how it ended.
I took it hard, took it real hard, and you could say I lost my mind a little bit for not being my brother's keeper, you know, because we was close, all of us was close, you know, and I didn't know how to deal with it.
It could have all been prevented if somebody was able to sit down with them and do some conflict resolution. Let's talk about our differences. Let's get all of this misunderstanding out to the surface so we can actually know what is going on. Since that didn't happen, we have 2 tragedies.
I just still to this day can't understand why they did just have a sit down and work things out before it got to where it got to. You know, that's my whole issue is why didn't they try to sit them both down